Just hit record on mine, so we're live right now. Good to be here
Right.
with you again, bro.
Yeah, you too, man. It's beginning of a new year. The sun rising in the sky a little bit higher by about 2 minutes a day. It's starting to get brighter and a little bit warmer. The animals are acting differently. The buds are coming on the trees, and there's a few crocuses and daffodils coming up. I think spring's coming much earlier this year. It's been a mild one. We've barely had temperatures below freezing.
Ah,
No snow, hardly any frost.
yeah, I haven't had. I mean, I will tell you right now, this is the warmest winter I think I remember to date right now.
Right.
I actually
Okay.
had some of my plants producing some little leaves, and I'm like, "Whoa, it's too early! It's too early! Damn, man!" So it's weird because I'm like, I'm seeing everything kind of like not in its normalcy. Everything looks a little bit weird only because the weather's been so warm. During the day it
Yeah.
gets pretty warm. Like I think the warmest I've had here in month of December. I deal in Fahrenheit, but we're probably, I think I've seen like 62. I was out in a
Right.
t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All good stuff. So, conversation-wise, uh, I'm still writing my book, as you know, and I'm going over it, and I'm adding a lot of stuff. I'm elaborating, and what I'm also doing is I'm copying certain articles of Google and putting them in so people can get another opinion, so they don't just think I'm talking woo.
Mm-hmm.
All the subjects I'm speaking about, I pick an article from Google, which is pretty well saying the same thing from somebody that's, a lot more known and renowned than I am. And so they've got at least two perspectives, you know. And you know yourself, I touch on a lot of stuff. And so just including all that. And I've got no idea when I'm going to be finishing it, because I just keep getting more and more involved in it, and there's always more I want to say, and I'm
Yeah.
getting more elaborate with everything. And so my own personal psychology is being analysed, and I'm being very open about childhood trauma, recent trauma. When I shot in Africa, the effect that those things had on me, and what sent me into the dark night of the soul, the spiritual journey, and all that sort of stuff. So one of the things in particular that I wrote about in the book,
Aaron, I'm
my
gonna let you
encounter.
just keep talking. I can hear you. Okay.
Yeah,
Relax.
yeah, yeah. My encounter with what I consider to be Jesus, even though it was my internal dialogue, it came from another place, and it came about in very, very special circumstances, as I wrote about in the book. And to this day, I wonder what that was. And then when I had my encounter with Jehovah for a couple of hours, whilst I was on 3.5 grams of magic mushrooms, I'm absolutely perplexed, not being a believer. In actual fact, being very critical of the Judaic Bible, Old Testament and New. And so I'd like to, speak to you about those things and see what your opinions are.
Mm-hmm. I have a quick question. So when you when you said you had this encounter with Jesus and whatnot, um, what's your belief about Jesus? Do you believe in Jesus? What is your
Oh,
idea of Jesus? And to the average person, Jesus is a man that lives in the sky. He looks like a white man with flowy hair and blue eyes. So, how did you see Jesus? And do you believe in Jesus? And what is Jesus to you?
Right. Well, this is it. This is what I want to speak about because,
Hmm.
just to say whether I believe in Jesus. Well, what sort of a Jesus? What
Hmm.
sort of an effigy? What sort of an apparition? What sort of a concept? What sort of a spirit? All these sort of things. But prior to that experience, um, I'd read the Bible a couple of times, and so I was interested in it. But as far as Jesus being the Son of God
Well,
and
did
being,
you, when you read the Bible? I'm sorry to cut in. I just want to make sure I get these points. So when you read the Bible the first time, then you said you read it the second time. Did you get something differently out of it the second time, or was your experience the same as when you read it the first time?
well, just to read the Bible without having the benefit of listening to biblical scholars is pretty well a waste of time because it's 2000 years old. The New Testament and the Old Testament, spans 1500 years BC. And so you've got a massive cultural difference.
Hmm.
You've got all different sorts of stuff going on in those books. And you really need other people's perspectives who have studied them greatly. So I listen to biblical scholars. I listen to scholars of spiritual literature. I listen to them making comparisons. At this moment in time, I'm into the Gnostic stuff. I'm into Nag Hammadi, scrolls, Book of Thomas, Book of Enoch, Book of Mary, all these sort of things, getting a different perspective on who Jesus was.
Hmm.
Now, as far as I'm concerned, uh, I think I would hedge my bets on accepting that Jesus was a man and he lived at that particular time, wasn't the Son of God, no more than we all are. And in the Book of Thomas and uh, I think primarily the Book of Thomas, you get a whole different vantage of what he was saying. And basically, what he was saying is that we're all God. We're all children of the one God. And the one God isn't a man up in the sky. It's the essence of what we are, who and what we are, the creator of the universe. And so God could be pure consciousness. God, in my estimation, is an intelligence which is unfathomable, but it from what everything comes out of. And there's no man that created anything per se, unless, of course, we want to start getting engaged with Anunnaki, Nephilim, um, Elohim, which means the powerful ones. I'm also looking into a lot of that at this moment in time, and that sounds a whole lot more feasible to me.
Hmm.
So, if we consider that Jesus was a scholar of the Old Testament and spiritual literature, and that he, in actual fact, lived for about 28 years in India, studying under the Gnostics and all different sorts of stuff, learning Reiki, the power of healing and all these sort of things. It is possible to heal people. And I do believe that there are people today that can do that. And even people like uh, Joe Dispenza and Greg Braden, they are absolutely emphatic about recent times people gathering around a person with cancer, putting on their hands with the intention to heal and watching the cancer disappear on a ultrasound screen before live filming going on. So very serious people getting involved with this. And Joe Dispenza wrote a lot of books. The main one is We Are the Placebo, how it is our intention and our consciousness that creates everything and heals ourselves or makes us sick. So I believe that Jesus knew lots of this stuff. And I think that now we are just getting into the realm of what some people knew 2000 years ago. Because we went through the dark ages where everything was destroyed and burnt, and people were hung, drowned, guillotined, and hung, drawn, and quartered, and all this stuff. If they got involved with anything outside of the Catholic Church. That's how much of an abomination that religion has been in the hands of the human being. So I don't have any allegiance to any of that. I don't have any allegiance to any religion. I have an allegiance to spirituality. And I think because I had this voice, I'll just run over again for the benefit of the viewers if they haven't heard this story before. But I was lying down on my couch and I'm listening to 432 hertz, and I did this every single day for a whole year. I do different methods of meditation. I'll do one method for a year, I'll do another method for 6 months, and something like this. And so this particular occasion, I'm lying down and I'm listening to 432 hertz. 432 hertz is the theta realm. It gets you directly into the realm of hypnosis, as you are aware, and it takes you into your trance state. So I was in this trance state for the best part of a year, not to mention now that I've already been meditating every single day for the past 14 years. So I'm very versed in that. And so behind me here is this picture on the wall. And somewhere in there, there was very, very clear a life-sized face of somebody that I instantly considered to be Jesus. You know, the classic, you know, trim beard, little goatee, and straight hair and a straight nose and all the sort of thing. Look, you know, all the pictures we've seen of Jesus. So I'd look for that picture in there since, and I can't find it for the life of me.
Mm-hmm.
When I had this experience, I told my daughter about it. And, you know, I showed her the picture of Jesus, and it was still there for about a week after that event. Now it's gone. And there's something switched in my mind. And I think it's because my vibration is outside of that realm of connection. Okay. And so the picture is no longer there. Maybe if I get back into my meditation with the 432 hertz again, then I'll get back into that vibration. So I opened my eyes from this hour and I just lay there looking at this picture. And then I saw the picture and I'm like, what the fuck? I got up off the couch and I goes to have a look and I look at it from this direction, that direction, and I'm absolutely categoric. It's the full-blown face. And I'm like, God damn, that's weird. So I goes and sits back, lies down on the couch, and I continue to look at it. Then within 30 seconds, there was all different sorts of waves and vibrations and feelings of ecstasy. The most powerful feeling of love and ecstasy that I've ever felt in my life. The closest I've ever come to that is when I take DMT, because that flushes your mind with dopamine, serotonin, and so you get this love and, you know, this beautiful feeling of well-being. So we know that we can induce these situations and scenarios via meditation when our mind is absolutely still. And so I'd obviously released a lot of dopamine or in my mind. And then I was looking at the picture, just astounded. And then a voice came into my head and it said to me that if you want to know what true love is, you have to come through me. And that's all it said. And when he said that, I was hyperventilating. I had all different sorts of orgasmic feelings in my body. It was like the onset of an astral projection where you get the waves coming up and down your body. And tears were just streaming down my cheeks as the most wonderful feeling of love. And so for many years, I'd been discounting love, and I've been philosophizing, intellectualizing what actually love is. And I could honestly say that I couldn't pinpoint it, the same as no philosopher has ever managed to pinpoint it. It's a feeling which is subjective. We all experience these things differently. But because I was reading lots of spiritual stuff and I had the inclination, then something came to me and told me what you have been looking for, you will only find it via me. Now, when you read the Bible says that Jesus exhibits unconditional love. Now, I'd had conditional love from Jehovah when I had 3.5 grams of mushrooms on one particular day about 6 months prior. Then I had a right good verbal emotional kick in from a spirit which I knew instantly to be Jehovah, and he reprimanded me for all of my transgressions against love, and he showed me via the mushrooms that love is everything. The universe consists of love. God is love. We're love. And tears streaming down my face for the next 2 hours as he ran through all the occasions that I was discounting love, until in the end it was absolutely irrefutable. Everything was love. And so I had that. But then it seemed that I'd had the version of love from the Father. You see, when you look into the Old Testament, the love of God is a conditional love. And if you don't love him, if you don't worship him, he'll smite you. And so there's so many accounts of this in the Old Testament, whereas Jesus, his is unconditional love, and you don't have to do anything for him to give you his love. But if you are going to feel it, then you have to accept it, and by accepting it, you love him also. And so I was trying to work out what all this stuff meant. And by the way, this last year, I found out what it was, because I got deep into the Christian faith with faith and, all the mechanisms and psychology which goes into that. So, having had that voice, and it was my voice, but it wasn't anything that I would have said. And I can't think for the life of me, and I wouldn't say that I believe in Jesus. And even to this day, I still don't believe that that was the Son of God, because there's so many issues with that. But there is something there. And I don't know why that I've had an encounter with Jehovah, with an encounter with Jesus, an encounter with angels in like the most crystal clear of astral journeys, whereby I was up in the sky and two human angels came to me and they gave me a subliminal message, which I also wrote about in the book. It was a Jungian archetypal message. And then I have been to hell for 18 hours, 666. And so all these things, I'm like, what on earth is going on? There's something that's dragging me screaming towards the Christian faith. And so this is why to this day I'm studying and listening to an enormous amount of other people's opinions and experiences, near-death experiences and all that sort of thing. So the question is then, for me and for you, is what was it that I actually heard? If it wasn't Jesus up in the sky, who is in actual fact God, speaking to me personally, then who was it and why?
All right. Well, I mean, I've got so many questions out of that monologue, to be honest with you, and I want to try to get through them as quickly.
Okay.
Not I don't want to rush you, but more or less like as condensed as possible, so that we can kind of get to the meat of it without
Yeah.
going into long drifts. But let me start with this. All right. Why do so many people worship Jesus?
Well, I mean, it's an individual thing. I think there's a lot of people who are afraid, lonely, insecure, and they very much cherish the idea of a God or Jesus looking after them, looking over them, somewhere where they're going to go to when they die. I think that's very paramount. Um, of course, there's lots of other reasons people could have had spiritual experiences, similar to what I've had. Lots of people have discounted God and Jesus, and then they've had something happen to them, and then they feel convinced that it was Jesus or God that helped them. And so, who knows? But I think the best thing is to do is to narrow this down to what we consider is a reality, because we're the only thing that ever we're going to get close enough to be able to discern
Hmm.
this from.
Right. And well, you said it, the feeling of loneliness and, having the want to, for somebody to look after them and whatnot. Uh, you don't think that a lot of spiritual people get into this same flow through, like, let's say, religifying the practice of meditation, religifying the practice of, like, let's say, binaural beats, religifying the whole spiritual practice, which really isn't designed to be a religious, act or doctrine or anything like that. But let me finish this point. And then aside from that, the act of feeling lonely, because I've been through this also. But this whole entire feeling of like wanting something to look over you is because you're not really self-actualized the way you think you are. You get what I'm saying? You're still in your humanity. Like humanity overall is where, how do you put it? Companion animals. Like we want, how do you call that, when animals, the social creatures, right? We're social creatures, but then based on human programming, just through generations of this shit, we always look for something outside of ourselves. But that's when you are still deep rooted here, when you really step out of that, right? Because we talk about bliss, we talk about nirvana, we talk about, it's still human emotions. I've been to the point where it surpassed that, and I started to feel like I was in a void, like I felt nothing. People would say, "Wow, that's you know, part of being human is emotions." Yes, we're experience of we're having of nirvana and bliss and all that, but through that, you're still bringing the super negative shit. There's no way around it. You know what I'm saying? And if you're in hell, you still got the capacity to bring the real good nirvanic bliss. That's why it doesn't matter what state you're in. There's always possibilities to, either uh, in drip size get to it, or it could be a quantum leap just with a change of mind. You get what I'm saying? Because you
Mhm.
can condition your mind and reprogram your mind, but then people, when they talk about a paradigm shift, that's why people say you change your mind, because you're everything's a tool here. You get what I'm saying? But I'll let you go from there, because then there's another question I want to ask, because and maybe you could even tie it into this end, or whatever you're going to tie it into right now. What is, Jesus? What was Jesus? Jesus was a man, right? I want to ask you, what is a man?
Well, before I ask that question, let
Yeah, yeah,
me, before I answer that one, let
yeah.
me just address what you said before.
Mhm,
Um, I know, being very psychologically versed and philosophically versed, spiritually versed, religiously versed, and all these sort of things. I've brought it all together to discover the actual human condition that experiences a numinous or religious experience. And it's when we have an absolute, still, calm, blissful state of mind.
mhm,
And so, within all religions and all spirituality, and whatever variety of attaining peace we go through, they entail a stillness of mind and heart, and we achieve this mostly by meditation. Now, we could purposely be in a meditation, but in lots of countries, and particularly in the older days, we wouldn't need to close our mind down from all the chatter, because we wouldn't have had it. We wouldn't have had anything like the amount of chatter that we've got going on now. We'd be working in the lands, we'd be doing simple jobs, we'd be living simple lives, and every day would be a meditation, doing whatever we're doing, because we're concentrated and focused on it. But now everyone's mind is stratified and scattered. And so this is why we need to bring it back down through meditation. And it's hard work, laborious, and for people starting out, boring.
mhm,
But when you get to that space, I've discovered that it's the exact same space that the Kabbalists talk about, the Buddhists talk about, the Christians talk about, the Muslims talk about. They all talk about that peace. And when you're in that peace, and when your heart is just open and empty, it's not full of anything. It doesn't need to be full. Our natural state, our natural unencumbered state is love. The natural unencumbered state of the universe apparently is love. It's the ego which takes us out of that. When we get rid of the ego, via meditation or taking psychedelics, specifically DMT, the ego is completely gone and you are back to your natural state, which is love. So I've felt this. I know that the universe is love because I've felt it myriad of times on DMT and in meditation. And so I know that all of these religions and spiritual avenues, they're pointing to the same space. It's that hub, the center, the very essence of what it is to be human being without the ego. And so I would even go as far to say that heaven is the right side of the brain and hell is the left side. Hell is the cognition and heaven is the uncognizant facet of us. And when we look at the Garden of Eden, in the Garden of Eden, initially, Adam and
Hold up,
Eve
before
were
you go into that point, do you believe in the concept of good and evil?
the concept, yes.
You believe in good and evil? So I believe the whole concept of good and evil came out of religion. You get what I'm saying? In order for a religion to exist, you have to have a polar opposite end of evil to exist. The thing is that the way people look at evil, they look at the evil as the bad guy and the right side as the good guy. There really is no, and this is just, what I'm going to explain my point and then I'll ask you questions along the way. There is no bad and good. You get what I'm saying? Because what's bad to one could be good to another. What's good to one could be bad to another. But the right and left brain are meant to be synchronized for you to have an experience here as a self-actualized, a singularity. You get what I'm saying? But there's no, like, the whole war that we look at outside of ourselves is that internal war that we haven't integrated to basically utilize it to our advantage to say we're a complete whole person. We can look at one side where, as a child, you don't use that left side as much as you do the right side, but when you get older, you start to use the left side more, and you start to diminish more the right side because you're told not to imagine so much, stop being such a dreamer and whatnot. Just examples, right? So if we were to say that the right side is good and the left side is bad, that's like saying we're born good and we just turn bad. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
ultimately, when we live, we say life is good and then death is bad. But death is not supposed to be bad. Death is just another process of what we're doing here in the process of life. You're supposed to kind of integrate the two because you're supposed to learn actually how to die while you're alive, just like you meditate, have spiritual experiences. Meanwhile, you're still in the physical realm and still be able to integrate or talk about what is unseen in the world of is seen. Because if not, then you're just going to walk around saying, let's say seeing is believing and not believing is just seen. Or, you get what I'm trying to say with that? It's kind of like trying to merge everything together and utilize everything and to say, yeah, everything is one. Because if you're separating it, that's basically ego. But God sees everything as one. And then I want to ask you again, like what I asked you before, what is a man? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, before
Are you going to get into the Garden of Eden, by the way, just so you don't lose your point?
yeah,
But I want to
the
clarify that
Garden,
before you jump in there.
yeah, the Garden of Eden.
Well, don't jump on that yet, just because I want to go through that before you get into Garden of Eden. Because obviously, the Garden of Eden might tie into like man and woman with Adam and Eve. I don't know if that's what you're going to get into, but I want to clarify what is a man, and then what do you think about just looking at everything from the singular point or the non-dual perspective? Because a lot of people look, if you watch videos online, there's a lot of videos where people are talking about non-duality, but a lot of this is just they're using knowledge to explain it, but they're not really coming from a space where it's actualized from within themselves.
yeah, well, I mean, fundamentally,
Mm-hmm.
there is only one thing going on in the universe, and that one thing is intelligence without matter, devoid of matter.
Mm-hmm.
In the quantum field, quantum physicists say that there is only pure probability there. There is no matter until the consciousness decides it wants to create matter, and then it thinks about uh, particles. What we've got like 194 particles in the whole cosmos.
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently the conscious entity, which is the fundamental premise of the cosmos, thinks things into being, and that's very much in line with what God is supposed to have done in the Bible. And so the ancient writers knew something about this even then. Now, everything comes out of nothing, and this is the whole conundrum that the material world is in at this moment in time, because they say, well, how can something come out of nothing? Well, what comes out of nothing isn't in actual fact something. It's only the illusion of something, because there is no matter here. There's no physical matter here. So there's only ideas that are coming out of ideas. You
What is
see?
nothing? What is the nothing? What is nothing?
Well, I mean, even to say nothing, I mean, it's not a correct terminology, because if we say no thing, then we're comparing it against something.
Hmm.
But
Exactly.
fundamentally, yeah,
Hmm.
fundamentally, the premise of the universe, there is isness,
Hmm.
and the isness is hugely intelligent, and the mind of God. That's what I consider it to be,
So you see what
and
you said,
I,
like you see how you just said is isness, right? So wouldn't that,
yeah.
like, you know how we say as within, so without, wouldn't that be something that should be reflected here in the physical? However, in order for us to have an experience, we give the meaning to something being bad or good, depending from our perspective and our preference, right?
Well, it doesn't have to be good or bad. We
Hmm.
give the meaning to everything,
Right.
because if you don't have black, you can't have white. If you don't have hard, you can't have soft. And you don't have light, you don't have dark. So therefore, what we do is, out of our imagination, we create everything.
Hmm.
It's our consciousness doing exactly what God did in the Old Testament, just by thinking things into being. And so that's all we've done, because if we take away language and concepts, then there would be nothing distinguishable from anything else in the whole of the cosmos, because it would just be isness. It is only when we label something and we have a consensus that something becomes separate from everything else. So, can you imagine, in the beginning, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve never had any concept of all these things, because they were like primates. They never had an ego. And they were just living their lives like pigs in shit, never thought about anything, just completely in the moment, automated. But then when they ate from the fruit of knowledge, that's, in my estimation, this is what I'm saying in the book, that's when their ego was born. And that's when they entered into hell, because as soon as they acquired knowledge, well, they knew things, and they entered into the world of opposites. And all of a sudden, they looked down and noticed that they were naked. And oh my goodness, what a shame that was. All this sort of stuff. So what I'm saying is, in relation to our minds, we've got split brain. All living things, by the way, this has been discerned, and it hasn't been proven to be wrong. All living animals have split brain, and so they need the split brain because the cosmos is split. The cosmos is dichotomous. The cosmos, it has polarities, and so, of course, cosmos is being mother, then it's going to give birth to all shards of itself.
What is
And
the
so
purpose, Aaron? What is the purpose of the polarities?
the purpose of the polarity is so that something can be discerned from something else.
Hmm.
Because if there's no polarity, there is nothing.
Right. So we would need the chemistry, right?
Sorry?
We would need the chemistry, right? The chemistry.
Well, there wouldn't be anything at all.
Hmm.
Without polarity, there would be nothing. Because
Right.
just simply, without light, there's no dark. Without
Hmm.
dark, there's no light.
Hmm.
And so, that's it. That's what the polarity is all about. But you take the polarity away, and you take the human being away. You take the cosmos away. You take everything away.
Hey,
This cosmos cannot exist without the polarity.
right. Aaron, do you think Adam and Eve were actual people that once walked the garden?
No.
Do you believe Jesus once walked the planet?
I think that that's very possible. Yes.
Okay. The reason I asked this is because we've had conversations where uh, we talked about history, we talked about quantum science, and I'm really inclined into this only because of certain experiences I've had that nothing exists only like what I'm experiencing now, and I'm going to the point where on a macro level, when I was born, up until the point I became aware is when things existed in my reality. Anything beforehand, as far as what I've been told, even about JFK, Martin Luther King, all those are stories. But things that, of course, we could tap into as far as energy signatures, because there's a lot of energy into that figure of Jesus Christ. You get what I'm saying? Which is a symbol. Everybody is a walking symbol. But the reason I'm asking this is because you said you had the voices in your head, and then you ask, why did this particularly happen to you? But I've had a plethora of conversations with many Christians who said that they had conversations with Christ the same exact way that you did, where it appeared to them as a man, same figure of Jesus Christ with the beard and the blue eyes, white flowy hair and whatnot. Same exact scenario. So why did you have the same experience as another Christian, and how do you think that that other Christian tapped into that? And was it similar to what you were doing, or do you think that they were doing it in a different way? How do you think they must have had the experience you had? And do you consider yourself a religious person?
No, I don't consider myself religious. I'm spiritual,
Hmm.
but you see, this is the very essence
Hmm.
of what I wanted to draw this conversation
Hmm.
into being, and that is to ask the question: what are egregores? Because I
Ah,
am convinced that Jesus, God, and many things are egregores. I even believe that our own ego is an egregore,
absolutely.
and
Yeah,
yes, and so
absolutely.
and so
We've
you
got a
see,
we've got a pantheon of them, and that's why we use different ones every time we associate ourselves in public with different people. Like you'll act a certain way with your friends than you do in a job interview. Or we got a bunch of different ones. We just utilize. We got a bag of tools, and we decide which one we're gonna suit ourselves up with. You get what I'm saying? Because that's all we are. We're
yeah.
suiting ourselves up. We put on a pair of shoes. We put the suits on. We want to present ourselves in public, but the ego is the same way. The characters we use, we present ourselves a certain way. You could even see the type of characters people are utilizing in the face. You get what I'm saying? You can see when somebody has a certain character to them. I mean, you can see that. You can see it.
Oh, yeah, they're
Mhm.
emulating something they've seen somewhere else.
Mhm.
Now, there's many occasion when I am conversing and maybe goofing off or this sort of thing that I'm calling on lines I've read in the book, scenes I've seen in the movie, characters that I've seen, I remember from school or from here, there, and everywhere. And this is what we do. You see, we aren't anything ourselves
Yeah,
per se.
yeah,
We are conglomerate of all the experiences that we've had, all the influences which we've had.
yeah,
There is
absolutely.
nothing called the self here except a memory of the things that we consider is ours and mine.
Right.
But this egregore thing, you see, the reason why
Hey,
we
Aaron,
all have,
Aaron. I don't want to. I mean, you don't mind if I just stop you whenever I like. I want to make sure we stay on that one topic before we get into
yeah,
egregores.
yeah.
But you don't mind. I don't mind. I don't want to be rude, cutting you off and whatnot. I just want to make sure we don't
Yes,
drift.
so we're coming back. We're building up to the egregore
Yeah, yeah.
thing, yeah?
So what I want to ask is, we talked about, because you showed me a video of Billy Carson. I'm sure you've had many different ideas as to what reality is, but we want to look at it from the, let's say, the simulation theory, the quantum science, the quantum mechanics, the observer theory, and whatnot. Um, you know, let's say, hold on a second. I had it. So let's say, um, Adam and Eve. You believe in that history, like we said, you didn't believe in, but you believe Jesus once walked the earth. Do you believe in history the same way as if something happened before you were born? Like, I don't believe, in my opinion, this is from my stance, that nothing happened before I was born, and in kind, when I die, the whole world that I'm observing into reality dies with me, because I'm the creator of my worldview and the reality that we live in. Even though when I die, you appear to keep living, right? From your perspective, as a version or a piece, I may even live vicariously through something here in this reality. I mean, this is how people are basically channeling energy. It's all symbiotically happening, but it's also, how we call it, reciprocally also happening as far as exchange of energy. This is how we want to get into. Like, I've had arguments with vegans as far as to like what happens with certain animals or why they're even in that state to begin with. With the concept of reincarnation is something I want to talk to you about, and what your perspective and views on that are. You know what I'm saying? And only because of the book I read that you wrote has a lot of, the perspective of God and whatnot, and you question a lot of religion. I want to actually get to the real core questions with you, in good faith, of course. That's why I want to
Yeah.
make sure I address these little points. But you said you saw everything as a simulation to some extent. How could you actually believe in history if you didn't experience it, or your actual vessel wasn't around at that time, that point in time ever happened? So can you just go into that real quick?
Well, I mean, if we speak to any spiritual person, they will tell you that there is no past, there's no future, there's only now. There's only ever been now.
Yeah, but then
And
in the
so,
same breath, these people start to talk about past lives and shit. And even that can be into a little slippery slope. We got to make sure we understand why or how they can even say past lives, or how you could even incorporate that into what you're talking about now as far as past life.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, the closest I can come to shedding any rational thought on that is, like some people hypothesize, that everything that ever been conceived possible has already happened,
Hmm.
and it's all in the akasha, and life is like a DVD.
What is the Akasha?
The akasha is
These questions are questions
every
I even had, like, as I was coming into this little, what we call journey. But these are
right.
questions that I'm sure a lot of people have. That's why I want to make sure I slap them in there as we go along. But what is the Akasha? And then
Yeah.
continue what you were saying.
Well, as far as Hindus are concerned, and this is a variety of Indians living about 3,500 years ago in the Hindus Valley, they came up with this Akasha, which reputedly is all the information that's ever been known and ever will be known. It's all in the ether somehow. And we are like radio antennae, and we can tap into this stuff. Now, before the advent of Wi-Fi, this could be considered to be very woo. But now, with the advent of Wi-Fi, we can see that exactly the same thing is going on, only now we have a technological explanation for it.
Hmm.
You see?
Yep.
But you see, the explanation for the Wi-Fi is that these transmitted waves of information are coming from huge servers, computers, whereas the Akasha, the information is coming from the mind of God.
Hmm.
So
So
that's what the Akasha is.
let's quickly cover this question, because the Akasha, I believe, I'm all things. My body is the Akashic records. I come in here into this reality in the suit of God, in the armor of God, and I could basically tap into anything, and I would be convinced that it's probably a past life of mine when it's not. I just tapped into a reality. You get what I'm saying? Because I am all these things, and I'm all the people outside of me that I collapse into existence. But let me ask you this: why? Like, I want to ask you the question actually before. Why do you think a Christian had the same experience that you had, yet they're Christian and you're saying you're spiritual?
Okay, just before then, though, just
Mhm.
let's get back to the Akasha. I think
Okay,
the
yeah, yeah,
Akasha is very similar to consciousness, because consciousness holds everything.
yeah.
Akasha is just a different terminology, you see. But it's just, they're both a motherboard. They're both the mind of God, or the if it's a simulation, it's the server, the huge server. There's one central point of knowledge and information where all comes out of, or all is within, and you call it consciousness, call it the Akasha, whatever you want to refer to it as. That's that. Aside. Now, why did I have an experience which I shouldn't have had necessarily,
Mhm.
not being an adherent of the Christian faith. In actual fact, I've said an enormous amount of derogatory things about the Christian faith, bordering on absolute hate for the vile stuff which is depicted in the Old Testament. And how can in any reasonable mind or in good conscience anybody say that that came from a loving God? There's so many scenarios of murder and persecution and slaughter and all different sorts of things coming from a God that's supposed to love its children. And the
Mhm.
big one is, Ziggy, is that when God finally got fed up with his creation, he sent a flood to wipe out 99.999% of everything that he ever
Yeah.
created.
Mhm.
And so, what sort of a fucking schizo motherfucker is this dude?
Uh-huh.
Not to be trusted. Is most certainly not to be trusted. So, getting back then to your question of why I had that experience,
Mhm.
um, and by rights, it should be a Christian experience. Well, it's because we're all tapping into the same Akasha. We all are feeding from the same consciousness. And if we are inquisitive or if we have a propensity to think these things, then what we do is we create them like God creates. When we think about things, we make manifest. That's how consciousness works. Look around you. That all the things that human beings have created, they started with a thought. And so this is it. We are God, effectively. Consciousness is God. Everything in the cosmos is God. And whatever happens within the cosmos is God.
Right.
And there's no man up in the sky that's doing this and doing that. It's
So,
just silly stories. Now,
so
getting back to the Garden of Eden, this is really
wait,
important,
wait,
Ziggy.
real quick. I'm gonna just tap this little part in. So, you remember I told you I got into many different paths. I was Rosicrucian, left hand path. I mean, you name it. I've delved into many little things because of so much curiosity. But I've also, I think we had this conversation in one of our past chats. But some people tend to religify certain things. But I remember that certain things would happen to me. And if you're still in that human perspective, there's why I asked you, why do people worship Jesus? Because of that internal programming that humanity has, that you're really supposed to overcome it.
Yeah.
You tend to worship these things outside of you. You get what I'm saying? Only because you look at that as something bigger than you. But I
Yeah.
had this realization, right, that once I stopped religifying certain things, it was a realization that what I was observing were aspects and versions of myself in the same way I'm looking at it through humans, I'm looking at it in the spiritual realm. It doesn't matter if it was a demonic deity, I don't care if it was Jesus Christ, it doesn't matter what it is. They're all ideas that were created by man to express what the ideas of polarity here is. But
Yeah.
I had that little, a flinch of experience where I realized that I'm actually looking at myself. But when you do know that you're looking at yourself, and it's not somebody telling you that you're looking at yourself, but you just know. Because you could think you know things, but if you just know, and I'm not saying you in particular, but me in general, when I saw this and I realized I'm looking at myself, things that would normally scare me, I started to have a realization of what unconditional love is. Because I was able to integrate whatever it was. If it was evil, if it was bad, if it was ugly, if it was beautiful, whatever it may be. It only looks beautiful, ugly, bad, or good. It's because my humanity is putting it into that. I talked about this
Yes.
at one point when I went into a deep meditation. I started to see certain colors that I've never seen before. Yet, if somebody was to ask me what's the closest color, of course my brain gave me the closest color it would resemble to the one I actually know here. Roy, whether
Yeah.
it be anything from the color of the rainbow. But there's a myriad of different colors. But your brain will make sense out of what it make out of the closest color that it can correlate to that color you saw. You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
anything that I'm looking at, once I learned that I'm looking at myself, everything that I'm doing is, you know, it's like, and you're in the mental realm to some extent. So when you say like, why did it happen to you? How did it talk to you? And I'm not saying you did, but do you think or possibly consider that you could be religifying a lot of your philosophies and a lot of your spirituality in a way that gave you a frequency match the same way that a Christian has the frequency match to look at the character outside of themselves as bigger than them and whatnot, when in actuality they're looking at themselves, because Christ is a man. Jesus was a man. Christ is the chrism, the oil inside of you. That means anointed one. But and that's a consciousness. But the man is basically you. You're created in that image, or that image is created in your out of you. Because if you really look at it, you're an instrument of the mind, right? So the same way your mind created that image, man, to give you a mirror back of what you are. But then again, because of programming, you think it's bigger than you, and then that's where the worship gene starts to kick in. That Billy Carson talked about at one point. That worship gene that we have in us, right? So do you think
Yeah,
possibly that could have been that, a little bit of religion? Because if you look at it, if I go into a debate all the time and try to battle Christians, and I'm actually saying my concept is good and yours is bad because I'm sitting in a position to argue with you. So that means that I'm already
yeah.
religifying it by going bad and good. You get what I'm saying? So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like ramble on, but very make some points there.
Our consciousness creates everything.
Yeah.
Yes. And what the consciousness does is, you see, because we have an unconscious or subconscious, it isn't actually unconscious. That's a misnomer. It's the subconscious. And the subconscious is like an iceberg. It's like the 90% below the water, and you only see the top part of the iceberg. Well, that's our everyday consciousness. So our subconscious is absorbing an enormous amount of information, and it isn't bringing it to the notice of our everyday consciousness, because otherwise it will be overwhelmed. Because when we go about doing things, we're hearing everything, we're seeing everything, we're experiencing everything, we're storing all this information up. And there's been tests with open head, cranium off the top, brain surgery, with scientists probing certain parts of the brain, and they're triggering memories of many, many years ago. And they're as clear as day. They can see it in full technicolor, with their eyes closed and everything. So that indicates that everything we ever experience is still in our consciousness, whether it's our brain or what, but it's still there. Now, I'd known that Jesus represented unconditional love. I've known this for many, many years, studying the Bible and religion and that. And because my consciousness was craving an answer, I do believe it's very possible that my subconscious delivered an answer which would appease my everyday consciousness. And it spoke to me in my voice, with my words, with my logic. And when I've had God speak to me, what I've considered God speak to me, God spoke to me in my logical reasoning, with illustrations which my mind would have written. And so, therefore, we are the author of all things. Now, when I spoke to a pastor and I said, how would God speak to me to let me know that he is there? And he said to me, God is going to speak to you however he can get through to you. So therefore, then, however our individual consciousness works, that's the portal that God is going to work through. But we don't need God to do that. We've got an unconscious, we've got the Akasha, we've got everything that's ever been known, will be known, and has been via our consciousness, and our antennae tap into that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's God. God is the cosmos. God is all that's ever been known and all sorts of things. So when we are seeking, so shall we find. And that's why it says in the Bible, when you ask, so shall you be given. And I know this absolutely to be true, because when I've asked, when I've focused, when I've put all of my energy down into, discovering and wanting something, I've brought it about. And miraculously, it would appear to be the work of God.
Yep.
See? So what you're saying, yes, we're all the author of our own reality. Why do Christians have the same thing that I've had? Because we tap into the same stuff. We've got the same consciousness or similar, different levels of complexity. But we tap into the same stuff. We're tapping into the mind of God. And so is God Jehovah? I don't think so. Is God Allah? I don't think so. Whatever we want to call this essence is a cultural derivative. And of course, people have been calling this thing different names forever. And they'll go on to call it different names, for thousands of years into the so-called future. But there's going to be one essence, and that pertains to that which we are, that which the cosmos is, which is pure isness, God consciousness.
So let me ask you, Aaron, because you said subconscious and conscious, but there's no unconscious.
Yes,
Um,
I don't know. I think unconscious is a misnomer because there's nothing unconscious.
mhm.
You see, when we go to sleep, we're supposed to be unconscious, but we're not unconscious because we're dreaming. When we have an anesthetic, we're supposed to be unconscious, and yet the bodies that our spirits can leave the body and we can know exactly what's going on. So we're not unconscious. Unconscious is a misnomer by Freud, I think, in the times.
So what
Nobody is
about
un.
have you out knocked out
Yes.
on you see memory for a while, even when you wake up, you're still wondering what the fuck happened. A while for your brain to register
Well,
that
you see, what.
unconscious. Where were you if like what you were,
Here's,
what moment you
here's
got? Hmm?
Yeah, right then. I was knocked out once when I was competing
Keep talking. I can hear you. I
in
can hear
full
you. Just keep
contact
talking.
karate.
Hmm.
But I had no recollection of that other than that I just lost my state of awareness for a few seconds. But in recent times, let's say like, I don't know, 5 years ago, when I was living down in Portugal, you may remember my videos with Patrick. Patrick came down
Yeah.
to
Yep.
live in that region for 5 months. And every single day for 8 hours, we spent together philosophizing. Can you imagine? And it turns out that him and I we could have been, spiritual brothers. We were almost identical. Now, he turned me on to something that he used to do as a kid. And that was compromise the carotid artery to the point whereby you pass out. And
Hmm.
so what you do is you hyperventilate about 10 times, and at the same time, your friend is squeezing, pulsating both sides of your neck, but primarily to compromise your carotid or artery until you pass out. When you pass out, your ego dies, of course. But what happens is when you gain consciousness for a few milliseconds or seconds, the ego hasn't come back online. You are pure consciousness and you feel absolutely beautiful. Now, where I haven't seen this or felt this before, every time I take DMT, DMT obliterates your ego if you take enough. And so, therefore, you go into God consciousness. It's the most beautiful and wonderful feeling. This is what they've all been speaking about forever. It's so simple with a little bit of experience to find that kingdom of God, to find heaven, to find nirvana, to find samadhi. It's all the same essence.
Hmm.
It's your mind when the ego is offline.
Hmm.
Now then, briefly, just let me get this one in. Adam and Eve. Adam and
Wait,
Eve,
wait,
they
hold on,
had
hold on,
no ego.
hold on. Let me pause mine. Yeah, no, no, you could go on. Let me just pause it because it'll get too long on my end, and then you could go into the Adam and Eve. Just give me one.